welcome. We are almost at the end of Codemotion. He's not working in the organization, but if he was, he would be as happy as it is because it's finally getting over. But we're here today to have this panel, and I would like to clarify some rules of game here. First, my name is Thiago. I'm a Brazilian, but I live in the Netherlands. I'm also a tech lead, and we put these three people here together, mainly to answer questions from the audience and for you to ask things. I also have plenty of questions that I want to ask them as well, but I'll keep them a little bit as backup if you are not as creative as I would expect to. So, saying that, I would like to give first a round of applause for them for being here. And at first, each of them will have like 2 minutes to explain what they do in their company, what is their role as a tech lead there, and what is the business that they are doing in their company. So let me figure out how to turn this on. Come on, start.
Hi, I'm Chirpo, and I'm Chirpo. I'm an engineering manager at DAZN. DAZN is a sports streaming platform. Think about Netflix and Prime Video. Same thing, but we also have the challenge of streaming live events. And we are based in London, but we also have a dev center we are opening a dev center in Amsterdam, and also we have another dev center in Katowice and in Leeds. Currently, as I said, I'm an engineering manager. I'm managing basically 2 teams.
Good stuff. Hi, I'm Daniel, CTO of Picnic. Picnic is an online supermarket that has the mission to make online grocery shopping simple, fun, and affordable. We are Amsterdam-based, and the tech stack that we are looking into is the mobile shopping app, what you probably all have seen from different retail businesses, but also the entire supply chain side. So buying products, running it through a warehouse, and also the delivery side, route planning and route operations, or a rider app. So this is a pretty broad tech stack that gives a lot of interesting challenges. The team that we are running currently is 60 people, all in Amsterdam on the tech side. Hopefully soon a few more. If you're interested, just let me know.
Same here.
Hey, this is Arman Amjalar. I work as head of software engineering at UNO GmbH, which is a company based in Berlin. We're building electric scooters and solutions for urban mobility, so connected vehicles, mobility as a service. We're building both the hardware, the scooter itself, the connectivity, infrastructure, the IoT infrastructure, and cloud applications, and mobile applications as well. We currently have a team of 15 people. And basically, as the head of software engineering, my goal is to make sure we have an engineering culture that can scale up, but that can also deliver value to the business.
Cool. So I will start with something. I've seen a lot of roles in this technical leadership thing. CTO, CIO, head of engineering, VP of development, and all of them can have different perspectives in the company. And how do you see itself? Are you more like the visionary type that is actually giving the north of the company on the technology part? Are you like day-to-day doing the coding and reviewing the PRs? How do you see yourself in the middle of the technical leadership?
Who wants to start?
Okay. I kind of have an unorthodox view on this. I think a good engineering manager has to be present in every part of this role definition. You have to be a visionary so that you can lead people and make people believe in what you're pursuing professionally in the company. But also, for example, I'm involved in architectural decisions and not day-to-day code reviews, but if there is an important topic of discussion within the engineering team, I jump on and do some code reviews, or maybe write some libraries as well. But also, like, I'm actively doing budget and P&L responsibilities, so that Excel sheet as well, and hiring, obviously, to grow the team. And basically, you have to perform at least a little bit on all of these to be a good engineering manager. You cannot let your team down, and that means basically you have to know and learn a lot.
Cool. So there are kind of 2 dimensions that I add to what Thiago was saying. One thing is indeed the hiring part. So this is something, especially if you're in a scale-up A large part of the team will be involved in recruitment, and that's also for the engineering or the manager or the CTO. This is one dimension. The other dimension that comes also on my side is the product side. So sometimes this is now called a CTPO, so somebody who is actually doing the technical and the product side. Companies have split this up at some point, but what we are seeing is that this is so intertwined that you cannot really split it up. So I'm fulfilling more or less the role of heading both a product and the technology side. What I'm doing day by day is all kind of different things. On the one hand, code review of more kind of more difficult stuff, especially stuff that is more architecturally involved. Mainly also the product side, how the products that we are developing are operated in the business side. And then obviously also some form of P&L. Hopefully not too much, but that's also necessary.
Yeah, so I think the engineering manager role really depends, or also other roles depends on the context, on the size of the company, and etc. So I almost agree with Amargan in the sense that as an engineering manager, I don't provide any tech leadership vision to the teams. When they are asking me, hey, what do you do as a job? My main job is to make people happy and productive in the teams, at team level and individual level. So what I'm currently doing, I still think that a good engineering manager has to be technical, but with a very strong technical background, should be also able to talk the same language as other developers, so should be able to code. What I do, I am also involved in the hiring process, and I'm trying also to facilitate all the communication between the team and the rest of the business. I think I see myself as a filter between the team and the rest of the company, and my main job is to protect the team and empower the team.
I will go downstairs, leave them here on top, because I want to go close to the actual audience. Because I want to hear questions from you, and it's not magic, I'm here behind, just a second. Here. I wanted to ask, does anybody has questions to ask the panel? One, yeah.
Okay, so I think everybody on stage now mentioned hiring, and I think that's a very important part of our job. And I personally think it's the most direct way of for me to influence where my company is heading, actually. So I was wondering, especially because I think, I mean, DAZN is already quite big, from what I know. Picnic is growing heavily, from what I know, and you, I guess, have big plans as well. So I think the question is, how do you manage to find enough people that on the one hand are good enough and on the other hand suit your culture as well? Because I think it's very difficult to find like the middle way and to do a good job at that.
Yeah. So maybe I can give it a start, but I believe everybody has a kind of an opinion on this. In essence, it's a game that you need to play on both sides. On the one hand, you need more people, and everybody is more or less on a hiring hunt. But on the other hand, you need to also very actively manage the product backlogs. So what most companies have, and it's not different in Picnic, is that you have kind of stakeholders that are requesting 3 times, 4 times, 7 times, 10 times more features that you can actually in the available time do. So therefore, there's a very active stakeholder management part of our role to keep people more also happy while you're delivering only 10 or 20% of what they're asking for. So picking the right stuff there. On the recruitment side, my advice is never compromise on culture, never compromise on quality. Very simple. That is typically you end up in very difficult discussions because you end up in the kind of the loop, well, this guy could do a little bit of that. Maybe he's not a perfect candidate, but he could do at least more than not having him on board. On the long term, you will always fail with the strategy. Never take the wrong guys on board. So therefore, it's better to grow a little bit slower with the right team and maintain the culture while growing too fast with a culture that you have no longer under control.
Yeah, at DAZN, yes, we are hiring a lot, and we have, so they're basically are looking for lots of developers, and so the recruitment team, the business is pushing a lot. Also, it's part of my job to say, hey, stay calm, in the sense that for us, it's very important to build a strong foundation of people at the beginning, and we are also building our own dev culture at the moment, and we want the people that we are hiring to be able to build that culture with us. So that's why, for example, at the moment, we are not hiring that many juniors or mid developers, not because, hey, we want to just be the coolest. Doesn't make any sense. The thing is that in order to provide the right mentorship and support to juniors and mid, you need to build a strong foundation first. Because if we start hiring juniors and mids now, but we don't have enough seniors or other people that can mentor them, then both sides will be unhappy.
Good one.
I think mentorship is key here. What I did with UNU when I set up the team first, we went with senior hires, but then immediately we started hiring junior people. In fact, last year, I partnered with Women Tech Makers Berlin to teach JavaScript to a group of people who are not necessarily engineers. And last year we hired 2 people out of that group as full-time employees, and this year we're doing the same thing again. So the answer is basically you have to create your own engineers because the supply is not there. But there are enough people who wants to learn engineering and who wants to learn programming. So it's a lot affordable for companies to basically invest in teaching and bringing them up. If you have, again, enough mentors in your teams, you can definitely do it. And in the end, you're also giving back to the community so that less and less companies will suffer in the future due to lack of engineering resources. But the answer for me is basically we teach and create our own engineers.
Nice. So I have one follow-up question before someone takes, because it has to do a lot with the growing and getting more people on the team and growing the product. But in this last year, we heard a lot on the DevOps word, one thing called observability and talking about monitoring, and there is a hype around the Prometheus and all of these things. But on your level, how do you monitor how well you're doing at your job?
For me, at UNU, we have a Kanban style approach, and the biggest metric for me is if we can release a feature in under a week. You know, develop it start from scratch and release it to production in under a week. That's the only thing that I'm optimizing for, and we make sure, therefore, everything is digestible. Every chunk of work is digestible, so that we eliminate this. You know, it can take 3 months and 4 months, and you have to keep up with 1 month delay. And that's because that's giving hell to the business. You cannot afford that. So I have one single metric that I'm actively tracking and trying to improve, and it solves pretty much all the monitorability problem for me.
Cool. Well, we are doing more or less the same. We are doing very systematically on a week-by-week basis, measure the average PR throughput time, so which is really kind of a metric that we are building, and then we are trying to track on how we are doing efficiently from the point of when somebody commits a PR up to the point when it's merged. So this is one kind of key metric that we have towards the business. The other ones is the number of releases that we are doing, and there we are aiming mainly for kind of the consumer-facing systems, at least once per day a release, and then for the supply chain systems, which is for us something which is an internal system, we release a couple of times per day. So that usually creates enough happiness around the developers.
So I have my personal metric, so I count how many people are smiling on a stand-up on a Monday morning. So that will give you the idea how the teams, if the teams are happy or not. And this is very important because if a team is happy, it's very productive as well, usually. And the other thing that we do is that we tend to make the team empowered enough to be part also of the roadmap and things like that. So based on that, we give objectives to people in general. And we have lots of one-on-ones, for example, where we have discussion and open conversation about how things are going at the personal level, team level, business level.
Cool. So maybe one follow-up point here. So measuring kind of the number of smiling faces is an interesting part. One discussion or one topic that pops up on our side is how do you balance kind of business priorities versus technical priorities, so the stuff that from refactoring, et cetera, that you want to do, versus stuff that is not even on the technical roadmap, but which is more kind of open sourcing and all kind of other prototyping. So I'm not sure what your view is on this. What we have done is kind of the Google approach that you time box this, that you have a kind of a 20% rule that you can spend on all kind of prototyping that is absolutely not tracked. But this is something which I think works just half-half in our context. For Google, for instance, in the end, it was also a rule that was ditched because it became a 100 plus 20% rule. So my question is a bit maybe to you guys or to the audience, how do you handle this?
Yeah, so also for the audience, if you want to say something in the middle of the question, just raise your hands and say it. And this is something that I would also like to hear, because we are a bunch of curious engineers that want to try the new stuff, and they are usually the ones that have to be balancing like, okay, but let's focus on the business first before we go into this direction. How do you see this happening on your work?
So we made the experience that we're also reserving some kind of specific time block per week or per sprint for stuff that we call technical depth, that we call some kind of investigation, stuff like that. And it depends a little bit on the team and the members in the team, whether they are interested in doing that stuff. And some of them are mainly more doing technical depth tickets. The others are more investigating the new stuff. And at the very end, the innovation is finally also how well did the system work and how much we can improve it, or the team can improve it. And that works quite well for us, but I can understand the point of that's maybe a matter of the context as well.
If you
Well, making business happy is a good priority. And if you do that, you start running out of the backlog items. That's currently the issue at UNO, for example. We are out of backlog items, and that creates enough space for engineers to do whatever they want with the system, whether they want to refactor it or not. And the business is already happy because we're delivering stuff on the time and day that we promise. So there's almost never a discussion of, hey, I actually want to do some technical implementation. Please give us a week or something. We don't talk about these things. Usually, whenever there's something in the backlog that already gets shipped under a week, and everybody knows that we can do that, that leaves enough time and space for engineers to do whatever they want in terms of rewrites and technical implementation. And we do that a lot also with documentation as well and open sourcing. So sometimes an engineer would spend 1 week completely on open source projects or documentation or testing or improving the infrastructure because we basically are covering the product development part. And we're doing shifts basically within the team to achieve this.
So for me, it's mainly about trust in general. Of course, the business needs numbers, but if you are still thinking about having too many layers that are not communicating to each other, it's very difficult to move forward in general. So yeah, we also tracking stuff, we also have metrics, but basically once you build trust between all the departments, you don't have to justify, hey, we need to tackle this technical debt, we want to do this and that. People usually, at least in these two teams, are really empowered and part of the roadmap, so they can also self-adjust their workload and things like that. So my goal is also to get to a point where a developer fully understands that when he's writing code, he's not just writing code for fun, he's building a product. And this is the ultimate goal for the business and for the developer itself.
Yeah. So that is probably connecting very closely, that developers should very closely be also involved in the product loop. So in essence, if you want to run, you build it, you run it, a loop, then a developer, let's say the tech team in general, and especially the development team needs to be very closely involved in the specification, in the operational part of the products. So that's something what applies in very similar way as well for us.
I just want to add this thing. For example, a typical scenario usually is that, okay, the product needs a feature, okay? It communicates that to the manager communicates to the team. And every time, most of the time it happens that the product calls, asks the manager, hey, what's the status of this feature, for example? What I do is that don't ask me, ask the team. We have Slack, we have Teams. Why don't you talk directly to them? They know better than me what they're doing today.
I think this is a pretty important part because you mentioned in the beginning that you shield away a little bit the business impact to your development team. This is something where we have a little bit of differentiated approach because sometimes a team needs a reality check where it just needs to hear a little bit the shit that is happening out there to see which kind of products are going wrong, why are they going wrong, and what is the actual operational impact. So therefore, I'm applying also a filter, but sometimes by intention, we are more or less putting the filter of unfiltered just to make sure that everybody has also a reality check to see that stuff needs to change at some point.
Sure, but if you build trust when you are jumping in, hey, we need this done, they trust you because you empowered them before, right? So they understand that even if something is coming from the top, they are more than happy to accept that thing if you are building the right culture in general, right?
The question is, should something come from top? It's all kind of lateral. But anyway, that's a kind of a broader discussion.
Anybody want to comment? Question? Yeah. He has been asking for quite some time. Yeah. I can give to him. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah. So,
Let's see here.
is there any concrete stories in your professional career that influence you, like how you think about company culture, or what do you value in your team?
Where shall we start? Do you want to start? No.
Okay. Basically, what we follow is the scientific methodology. That is, you're open to change. You are open to being proven wrong and false, and you welcome it. And you do basically step-by-step increments of, with a research mindset, with backing your decisions by data, or backing your implementation by data. If you get this growth and development mindset in the engineering team, then basically most of the problems are already solving itself. So I'm kind of coming from an academic background, and I'm bringing this change mindset to the team, and that is the fundamental thing that we're building on. Because if you are ready to change, if you can adapt to change, and if you're welcoming always better solutions, the idea doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the idea is coming from, but that it's good, it's falsifiable, and until we prove this idea wrong, this is the best idea that we're following up with. And once we prove it wrong, we'll change. This is basically what we build our culture on.
I think this is a pretty good part pretty good point that you mentioned with the growth mindset, which we are applying in a very similar manner. And what we have been doing is, initially when we started the business, we thought from a first principle angle, where we thought about what is actually important for people to, in our context, to shop for food. So people don't want to pay much, people want to have it on time, and it should be friendly. And these are more or less 3 principles that nobody will ever probably deny. And that is more or less something what is kind of the pyramid that is defining all kind of products, all kind of technology that we are building up on our side. And if you go from this kind of the forward reasoning first principle approach, then you always end up in a products that customers like, and especially also that customers like more on the next day when you're building the next feature.
Yeah, basically, I agree with both of you. And yeah, what I wanted to add is that in general, during our hiring process, we try to, other than finding strong developers, we are also checking for people that understand that it's important to not question everything, but to ask themselves, why am I doing this? Why we decide to use this? Why are we going in this direction? And this will make your life much, much easier. And that's probably the main thing that I'm looking in developer in general, not just, yeah, I'm using React and MobX, woohoo, yes, what about in 2 years? Maybe it's something else, right? So we are looking more for developers that wants to build something for the end users, basically, not just for the technology per se.
More questions? Just go, someone in the back. Sorry, you are too much in the front.
We, as developers, I think we are very creative people, and I consider building an architecture as painting a collaborative canvas. My question is, how do you manage to coordinate all these creative minds, which also means opinionated minds? How do you manage to coordinate all these different opinions and giving to them enough freedom to evolve in these own ways, but at the same time controlling that the final delivery is not becoming a monster or a Frankenstein?
Time boxing is the key from my point of view, in the sense that we are open to all conversation, questioning, whatever, but at some point you'll say, okay, we need to find a solution in 25 minutes, for example.
I think you mentioned 2 points where you should be really careful about. Number 1 is managing, and number 2, controlling. In essence, for a successful tech project, you should try to keep both points as limited as possible. What you need is probably more leadership from from a tech lead, from a product lead, who gives more or less the red dot on the horizon. And this can be OKR, or this can be product targets and product goals on KPIs or whatever. But it's more important that a product lead or a tech lead defines targets where the product should go, and then the team itself, with all its kind of chaotic structure, should find a structure by themselves on how they run the process. And this means that some teams will run a Kanban, some teams will more a Scrum-based approach, and some teams will maybe even go back to a kind of a waterfall approach if it's a more kind of a traditional older team, or which is more, let's say, connected to the physical world. And this can also work as long as you're not falling into a kind of a management trap and more handle this as a kind of a leader.
Yeah, I want to add also that usually what we tend to do is that the team itself will set some rules for conversations. And again, even the fact that you have a roadmap, a team roadmap, this helps a lot, because every time you are spending too much time discussing something, say, hey, we are not going in the right direction. So usually what I'm trying to do now, for example, is that the teams will decide a roadmap, and then this roadmap will be shared and maybe even validated, let's say, or supported by the business or the product owner, whatever. And if you start in that way, it's much easier for the team to recognize that I'm not going in the right direction and things like that, without even me as a manager telling them, hey, you're not going in the right direction, because they are basically they are self-organizing. And
my answer to this is pretty simple. We follow falsifiability, and having opinions is really good, and I encourage all my engineers to have opinions of their own, but it has to be falsifiable. And therefore, when an opinion is based on facts, when you can falsify the facts, the discussion doesn't really happen. If you come at a point where you actually really have 2-3 alternatives, and all of them are good in terms of pros and cons, and you have to pick one, 3 different opinions from your 3 different architects, what we do is we basically build prototypes for all of them for up to a week or up to 2 weeks, if our timeline allows that, and then try it. Everybody tries it, and gives points to those approaches and pick the best one. So as long as the baseline is falsifiability, it's not strawman arguments. It's a lot simpler to deal with all these different opinions. And if you cannot back your opinion with facts or with data, then sorry, just find another one, and we're going to follow the other opinion, which is backed by data.
Anybody has comments on this? No, it's just question now. Okay, new questions. Okay.
Yeah, hello. Just wanted to know if you are also leading remote teams or remote workers, or let's say if your companies have allowances for working from home, and how does it work for you?
At UNO, we don't require people to work from the office, although we have a central office. Most of the time people are at the office, but they can work from home whenever they want. We don't have a policy for that. Before UNO, I was managing an entirely remote team, and that was also working. In fact, we had such a culture that we had to stop people from working overtime when they're remote, because the visibility of their work is much less. They tend to work overtime to just show that they are working. And if you get this culture right, that, hey, this is expected of you and nothing more, please stop working, then this thing is working out. And we do all our communication in written form over Slack or over Confluence as a wiki. And therefore, it doesn't really matter that we are at the same place at the same time. For example, we don't even do daily Scrum meetings or stand-ups or whatever. Even if we do, it's in written form. So that's how we deal with it.
Looks very similar in our case. So we have just one office in Amsterdam. We are, in essence, pretty open when you're showing up in the office. In essence, we have a kind of our weekly sprints that we are running, and then you participate in this sprint. What is probably pretty essential for us is that engineers should be driven more by the kind of the weekly or the monthly goals that they are striving for, and not so much about how much you show up, etc. If you're looking for working hours and working time, that is something which is indeed a little bit easier if you have people in the office, because then, in essence, you can easier build up the culture, and then you have also kind of a more healthy balance between the kind of the classical working hours and the stuff that you do a little bit beyond that. When we had co-located teams, what we learned is, even if you're working in exactly the same office, it's super important that you move as often as possible to written communication. It forces you to express your things or your mind, your ideas, much more accurately than if you have kind of face-to-face meetings or if you just talk about it. So even so use Slack even if you are just communicating to somebody close to you, because that is already the first level of a specification if you write it down in a Slack message.
Same for us. Fortunately, we don't have remote workers, not because we don't want to, but because I think you should be well prepared for that. I mean, you can't just say, hey, you can start working from home full-time tomorrow, starting tomorrow. You need to be prepared. You have a structure and also, let's say, processes around that. But in the DAZN, basically, if you want to work from home 1, 2, or 3 days per week, it's fine. And you don't have to come to me to ask, hey, Chirpo, can I work from home? No, just talk to the team. For the team, it's fine. It's fine for everyone. As long as you bring value, who cares if you're working from home or from the office in general?
I came here to the back so someone can ask questions from here. Yeah.
How do you ensure that looking for a cultural fit isn't a shorthand for we only hire white dudes? Because I've worked in several companies where that has been, oh, she wasn't a cultural fit, or this person of color wasn't a cultural fit, was shorthand for, we have this rock star asshole who doesn't like this person challenging their ideas. That's my question.
Okay, so I'm taking the hard one. No, to be frank, this is a very fair point, and this is something what I think is a general problem or challenge for the tech industry. You should, with this kind of cultural fit, you should try to normalize or let's say define norms and qualities on how you actually quantify or qualify the cultural fit. And if you have a kind of a catalog how you check cultural fit, then you can at least objectify a little bit the cultural fit part. The other one is if you do an argument over cultural fit, purely over cultural fit, you will have always a bias. So I think you should always have a kind of non-cultural fit argument if you're rejecting somebody. Otherwise, it will be very likely a biased decision.
Let me first start by saying that I think 40% of my team is female at UNU. And we have only, out of 15 people, we have only one German team member. All the rest is coming from all parts of the world. So diversity is actually very important for us. And we do that by keeping our cultural fit to 5 company values that are just preferences in life. For example, are you curious? Are you connected to people or to city? Do you care about other people or your city or the environment? Are you a creative challenger? Would you like to fix if you see something is not performing well or if it's broken? So we keep our evaluation based on these values that are open on our webpage, and we actually also encourage people, candidates, to read through these and make up their own minds. And therefore, we could achieve a wide diversity in the team. And this has to happen actively, pushed by the engineering managers. In the end, you're the hiring manager, and you have to make sure there's a good representation within your team of different people, different genders, different ethnicities, and different worldviews, actually. And people are just lying about this, and as you pointed out, this basically becomes a filter for white privileged men. And as a manager, you have to basically break this and make your own culture instead.
Yeah, same thing here. One of the things, I mean, from the cultural fit point of view, basically, for me at least, is just someone that can communicate and is happy to communicate with other people. That's, from my point of view, the baseline. So one of the things is that I was thinking lots of years ago, it was more about, yeah, the perfect developer should be someone that's super passionate and goes to conferences, meetups, and things like that. I was wrong. There's not just one perfect developer type of person, okay? So, and you need to also to balance. Diversity and inclusivity is something that I really care, and it's something that also takes a lot of my time. But same as the point that I was making before, with the fact that at the moment we are trying to build a strong foundation, so we need also to be able to support those kind of things. And at the moment, yeah, we can do better. Yeah, I can say that. But we are trying to get in there.
More questions from the back? Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to hear that you have diverse teams, because that would lead to my next question. Given that you have diverse teams, and given that we've heard that diverse teams perform better normally, so they produce better products, they bring more money. So from your real life experience as tech leaders, what are some examples where diverse teams in terms of religion, gender, sexuality, ethnicity performed better? And also, how do you, let's say, increase inclusivity without promoting, let's say, without decreasing meritocracy, or without other people in your team feeling that there is no meritocracy in the team?
That's a very good question. So for Picnic as a delivery service, we started with so the initial team that wrote our rider app and the route planning app was a Dutch team. So let's say the team is Amsterdam-based, and it was a Dutch team. So they knew quite well how a kind of reasonably organized city logistics works. So this makes this becomes a problem if you have kind of a traffic jams in the city, or if you have other kind of special events, because then your city logistics looks very, very different. At this point in time, the team was not able to build up a kind of a proper algorithm to handle those kind of exceptional events. And then we had a guy coming from Calcutta, and then another guy who came from South America. And those guys had actually observed on a day-by-day basis how traffic jam looks like, how actually really kind of a crazy situation on the street looks like, and how you can handle this in a little bit more creative way. So those guys brought a very new perspective to the team, where we have a two-phased approach, a kind of a regular planning approach and a approach of the city logistics planning that takes traffic jams and all kind of exceptions into account. And this is a kind of a new perspective that we couldn't have had from the original Dutch team, which was kind of the traditional bias team that we are talking about here. So this is one of the examples where we see it really has helped us to go a step further.
Okay. First of all, yes, I think people coming from a diverse background want to make a presence in the tech field, so they already perform better. I've had a lot of experience with women engineers. I mean, the word computer is actually not a machine name. It's a job name that's primarily taken by women at the beginning of the 20th century. Computer was a woman. This whole field is practically invented by women. So in my experience as well, for example, women actually perform a lot better than male counterparts when it comes to engineering problems. But how do you make sure you can still keep the quality of output, whatever that means, while still keeping a diverse team? Well, this is basically why we are teaching JavaScript to women, so that we bring them on board, and we basically raise them with transferring our experiences, our knowledge. And because if there's a shortage, that's not an excuse. You can make up for it by investing your own personal time. If you do that, you basically create a wider, diverse background environment that still performs, because performance is only about culture. If you can give them the engineering mindset that you're looking for, basically everybody can do the same thing. We're not really inventing stuff from scratch. This is not rocket science. This is actually pretty straightforward when you have the baseline. And it's easily transferable. You just have to do the effort of transferring it, and then it works.
So, as I said, we are still building our dev culture. What we're doing is that, what I'm also facing is that sometimes people are not even thinking about this kind of stuff, diversity or inclusivity in general. And not because they are evil, but because they biased or they don't realize that. So internally we started having, for example, dedicated Slack or Teams channels like Women in Tech. We are hosting several meetups like React Girls and things like that, hoping that these things will push things forward.
Yeah, I just want to give one comment on this as well, because I'm also a tech lead and I also have to hire a lot of people. And something that I did that I got some problems with my white male engineers and the bro culture inside my company was, at some point, there were people that were very, very similar when you look at the CV and on the interview and on the technical testing. And I pushed to hire people from different backgrounds, different country, different sexual identity, different gender or things like that. And usually the white male in my company were like, yeah, but this is discrimination on the other way around or something like that. And usually you see these comments only coming from white male. So when they question the meritocracy and all these things, it's usually the people that think the meritocracy is going to the best schools and proposing their CVs. So I have my concerns on this, and I don't want to go further, but I think that lots of the companies are trying to make this better and better, but we have to look at ourselves all the times, and the micro aggressions that we see in our workspace, we should stand out at every moment. And because for me, it's easy to be there. I'm a white privileged male that went to nice universities. I cannot put myself in the position of a woman working in IT, but I can try to be someone that can help her to be there. And I hope that everybody can do this here. But let's move on to the next question.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Very little. So I read the research that women are underestimating their skills and not applying for jobs that are actually matching their skills, but with the jobs that require a less skill set. So we were looking for mid-level developers, and we didn't really have a lot of female candidates. So what I did was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I set up a new job ad that's a junior software engineer. That is how we got a lot more female candidates. And in fact, the candidates who are applying for those positions were at least as good as the men who are applying for the mid-level position. So basically, even like the wordings on your job listing is impactful on creating and supporting diversity. And this doesn't damage meritocracy at all.
So unfortunately, we don't have further time for more questions from the audience because we only have 2 minutes. And I have one last question that I want to ask them. Sorry, I have the mic.
Sorry we took too long.
No, but it's because I thought of this a lot, and you've been on the tech lead position for some time now, and you gain a lot of experience into this. But if you invented a time machine now, and you could go back in time to the first day before you start as a tech lead, and could give yourself a pep talk, like, don't screw this up on this way, or don't do that, what would you say?
Okay. So I will just tell to myself, listen more to and talk to more to people. That's the thing. Because when I started being as lead developer, I said, yeah, I'm a lead now. I can decide this, and this doesn't work at all. So yeah, listen more to people and talk to them.
I think listening to people is one of the key points. Stay modest, stay grounded. I think this is another really important part, and and never stop learning. Very important part.
I would say make sure people around you are happy and smiling, and the rest will follow.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much for coming, and let's give a round of applause for them.